Welcome to Dad Talk Today. My name is Eric Carroll, and we have an amazing show lined up for you. We are fighting for fathers all across the United States and all across the world where you can be glad to be dad. Stick around, guys. Dad Talk Today is about to begin. Hey guys, welcome to Dad Talk Today. We got an episode that people have been asking us to do for quite a while. Greg, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks, Eric. How are you?
I'm doing all right, brother. So we was talking a little bit before you came on. Everybody's been saying, you got to talk to Greg Ellis. You got to meet Greg. I'm like, guys, I know Greg, but he's been out there doing some important work. You've been getting some media behind this, man, with the book and everything. And I just want to say how much I appreciate you putting a spotlight on what we're going through. It's been very well appreciated by a lot of people, and people are taking notice. But for anybody in our audience that isn't familiar, let's get into your life story a little bit. Tell everybody a little bit about you and how you came into this battle with family law.
Well, first of all, thank you, Eric. You've been doing some great work. You've been out and about, and I want to turn the spotlight onto everyone watching and listening, because they're really the important people, the people who aren't on camera, who aren't being heard in family courts across Western civilization, from Australia to the tips of the ends of Hawaii. My story, gosh, I knew absolutely nothing about family law. Like literally, I didn't even know the words family law went together 6 years ago. I remember putting my wonderful 10-year-old boy to bed at bedtime. I put him to sleep a couple of nights before March 5th, 2015. And he said to me, Dad, so-and-so and so-and-so's parents at school just got divorced. You'll never divorce Mum. And we'd been married for 20 years. I was like, I promise you, son, we'll never get divorced. Well, gosh, cut to 2 days later, March 5th, 2015, in the span of 24 hours, I was ushered from my home in handcuffs, committed to an institution against my will, the first of 5 incarcerations, subjected to a temporary restraining order in divorce court on the basis of a false allegation, became homeless, almost destitute overnight, and watched helplessly as my professional reputation and personal reputation was irretrievably destroyed. And my sons, my 2 beautiful boys, the meaning of my life, who I love and loved and will always love dearly, 10 and 8 years old, lost their father for half their childhoods. So in crossing that legal Rubicon from citizen to respondent, I migrated from a world of presumed innocence and respected privacy to one of assumed guilt and immediate and ruthless judgment. So, I decided some time ago that I was going to put my story, I was going to basically become my own petitioner, if you will, because I was voiceless in family law. And I thought, should I do a show? Should I do a video cast, a podcast? And I arrived upon the starting place, the seed of doing a book. And that book is called The Respondent, Exposing the Cartel of Family Law. And it is my crazy but true cautionary tale story. Harrowing tale, I think, of how and so many other fathers and some mothers too suffer through this, how we can be removed from our home in handcuffs, put in jail, forced through mental health facilities, permanently separated from our kids, all because of one false allegation. In my particular case, it was 10 words strung together, a 10-word lie. So the cartel of family law showed up on my doorstep. They stole my freedom, kidnapped my children, and in essence, murdered my family. I know that sounds like a Hollywood movie trailer for a psychological thriller, but it's not. It's real life. So I decided to go on a mission with full purpose. I wasn't able to help and save my beautiful boys. So I have dedicated the rest of my life to helping others in what small ways I can, to either not be erased from their children not to be erased from their parents, and particularly forsaken fathers and forgotten men. in the court system because of the bias, and to really sound the alarm bell, I think, as to what's happening in family law and has been happening for decades. It's time that our politicians, our policymakers, our state legislatures, and our greedy, nefarious, spurious attorneys, who are the dregs of the legal system, took note and were called out. So, yeah, in essence, that's what brought me to writing the book, The Respondent.
Seems like there is a lot of similarities in those stories, and this isn't something you ever saw yourself doing, getting in here and being an advocate, raising the alarm about what's going on with family law. I'm curious, did you know anything about family law and what people go through, or even what parental alienation was before you started going through this?
No, didn't know the words family law, didn't know divorce court, didn't know parental alienation existed, the words existed, let alone what it meant. And so it was a real dystopian odyssey, spiraling down into the authoritarian maze, the Kafka trap, if you will, of divorce court, where there is no trapdoor. And what I found out was staggering, with a capital S&T, just totally staggering. And I have so much empathy and so much love, so much respect, and so much admiration. I'm mind boggled at how people in America, I live in America, and I love America. I'm an American citizen, but I have so much admiration for parents and children who've gone through the gauntlet and the quagmire of family law and survive and still have an attitude of positivity. Because, gosh, it can get you down, can't it?
It definitely can. When I started this, I had went through a contentious battle myself. Of course, I faced lies, but I had never been through like the false allegations that we're hearing a lot of these guys talking about. And people started reaching out to me, telling me what they was going through, and I kind of tried to keep it at arm's length. I was like, because I never want to be caught taken up for somebody that might have done this. And then it just kept coming, and I started seeing just how common these false allegations are, because it instantly gives that person the upper hand. I can shoot this silver bullet at you, and even if they prove that I was lying, there's no consequence for me. And your reputation, like you said, is destroyed. And you're somebody that was known there in Hollywood. I'm sure a lot of people knew who you were. What was it like going through these false allegations, Greg? I know that can't be easy.
Wow. Horrific. I mean, there's no other way to put it. Horrific. When you know you are innocent, when you know it's ridiculous, when you know it's just hearsay, and that's for me one of the biggest issues with family law. It's judges, attorneys, state bar associations, mediators, psychologists, etc. None of them want their dirty little secret to get out. No. And it's not going to be a secret for much longer than more I talk about it. Family law is the only branch of our legal system where there's no presumption of innocence. So if you think about that, murderers, rapists, terrorists, pedophiles, they all get more legal rights than law-abiding parents and citizens. And that silver bullet that you alluded to, I talk about this quite often. I mention it in my book, and I'm going to be doing a few speeches, talks on this, the silver bullet paradigm. It's a playbook of high conflict divorce, the smoking gun, if you will, of a corrupt legal system that's become the go-to strategy for divorce lawyers that guarantees victory before you even get in court. So I'm calling upon politicians and policymakers to reform and improve this one branch of our legal system that has no due process, no presumption of innocence, and where parents are found guilty till proven more guilty. It's a nearly $60 billion a year American divorce machine, incentivized to keep the presumption of guilt at the expense of families. Why are we standing idly by and not speaking out when people are making millions and billions of dollars, tens of billions of dollars annually, putting cash over kids, breaking up families? Good. I'm not talking about the few rare instances where, two people do genuinely have irreconcilable differences, and when two people enter this system, I defy anyone to get out easily. There is no get out easily. I don't think there's a get out difficult. It's very, very rare. And if you do get sucked into it, it's nigh on an impossibility to get out unscathed. So many people are suffering through this: depression, PTSD, suicide, social isolation. And what's our next generation going to look like? What's our next generation of children who are going to be adults going to look like? And you couple that as well, Eric, with the denigration and the devaluation of men recently that's happened with these postmodern, progressive, radical feminists. I'm not talking about true feminists, equality, empowerment feminists. I'm talking about this strain of radical feminists that want to do away with men, do away with the family, all men bad, toxic masculinity. You know what? It's time to speak up and call them out, because many of the statistics, you mentioned false allegations, so many of these statistics that they put out there are not actually true. They're not factual. They can't cite them. And they're the groups getting the millions of dollars and the millions of pounds in grant money. And able to, run these campaigns time and time again and have influence in positions of power and importance. So I think it's just important that we have integrity. We come from a place of speaking fact over fiction, and do it without bitterness and anger and regret. And that's where I try to come from.
You talk about the rare cases where there was actually an abuser. I mean, I'm sure it happens quite a bit, but for the most part, I believe we got loving parents that get caught up in this system, that are fighting in this family court system, the winner take all mentality, and that, it definitely brings more conflict, because the more conflict you got, the more money that's made. And we know that's true in family court, but we've been doing a lot of this media. I'm curious on your side. The first thing that is mentioned anytime I get on any type of media is the deadbeat dad. And they mention these rare instances, and it seems like that's meant to cancel out what we are going through. I'm curious, have you encountered any of that? And what are some of the challenges you've had trying to bring this to the mainstream?
Yeah, I haven't talked too much about that. I did write a piece called, what I think it was Walter Scott's Murder Examined. And it was the case of Walter Scott. I talked about George Floyd and Walter Scott. They were both killed by police officers. Even though George Floyd suffocated with a knee on his neck, while Walter Scott was peppered with bullets in his back. And it was a pretty high profile case in the legal system. But what very few people did, and particularly journalists, was look underneath as to why he was running that morning. Why, with a broken tail light, did he pull over when the police pulled him over for a broken tail light? And he was pulled over because he was a dead broke dad, not a deadbeat dad. His child support payments, which I think had gone up to $3,000, which it was an extremely large amount of money by anyone's standards. But by his standards, it was a lot of money. Couldn't pay interest, went to prison, got out, lost his job, more interest, 6,000, 10,000, 12. It just kept going up. So the morning he was arrested, the morning he was pulled over, I don't think he was just running from those two policemen who pulled him over, and he should never have been shot in the back 7 times. But he was running from the family law system. There was no escape for him, and that powerful branch of the law that's been targeting men, predominantly fathers across America, and profiteering from their suffering. And black fathers, especially in the South, have become all too easy pickings for them. And we want to tackle this. We have so much conversation about race in America. Well, let's talk about the inequality with regards to men and fathers and this system. So, I call it black child support. It's a bit provocative. It's not just black. Obviously, it's white too. But, dead broke dads. Because I've just heard so much about deadbeat dad. Deadbeat? Are you kidding me? I mean, when you're not provided access and you still have to pay, and there's so many men and fathers, as you know, Eric, that really try and strive and work hard to do the right thing. And integrity is not rewarded in family law. You're actually penalized for being a decent, loving father.
Oh, 100%, because they know that's the guy that's going to pay, right? The deadbeat is just going to say, do whatever you want to do. Just let me get through this. But $3,000 a month in child support you're talking about. I had to go, I got in a little bit late, but I went to a meeting in Georgia where they were talking about the child support laws. They have to have a meeting every so many years. And I was sitting in the background listening to him talk about, well, if these parents make more money, we need to be making sure that we get more money from them. And I had not planned on talking, but I raised my hand and I said, guys, you're talking about if they make more money, we got to get more money from them. And everybody was smiling. I was like, at what point did we lose the conversation about the needs of the child? I believe needs need to be met. Is it taking 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 on up? Some of these things that we're hearing. No, it's not. But they have to have that in order to profit. I'm curious, why do you think or how do you think they've got away with this so long?
Money, influence, power. I called out President Biden recently. He's a Catholic father. Well, to me, this is the national health emergency. So do something about it. Stop pussyfooting around with gender equality bills that say equality for all, particularly women and girls. Equality is equality. How about equality for people? All peoples, plural. And they've gone away. They've got away with it because it's cash. I think Walter Scott, talking about him, he ended up owing $18,000 in child support payments, had a bench warrant for his arrest when he was pulled over on that fateful day. And the court records show that in late 2008, he spent 6 months in jail over $6,800 in back child support. And he also spent single nights in jail in 2011, 2012 for missed payments. And you think about that, and you think about, because I was trying to bring it back to the personal story and the narrative, and
that's it, yeah.
Skip child support, go to jail, lose job, rinse, repeat. That's it. And even it's not just people like Walter Scott. I mean, God bless his soul, God rest his soul. But there's NBA players getting the awards against them are like $30,000-$40,000 a month. Now they may have a great contract, they may be able to pay that for a certain period of time. But what happens if they get injured? What happens if they retire or they don't get a new contract? How hard is it to go back into court and modify those child support payments? It's not. We need to address this system. We need to make it easier for parents to separate if they have irreconcilable differences. There should be 50-50 baseline rebuttable presumption of shared parenting across the board. I mean, we've seen it come in Arkansas and Kentucky, and I think there was some modifications in Arizona some time ago. But I have yet to hear, Eric, any argument that makes any kind of sense other than we're going to lose money as to why we shouldn't have a starting point of 50-50. And I'm sure the audience knows a lot about that. I don't need to educate you or people who are listening and watching as to what that means. But, someone who I've worked with before, Brad Pitt, Brad and Angie, I've worked with them both. They split. It should be 50-50. But no, Brad's not getting 50. So he has to fight to get to the 50. And it's seen as a victory. Well, no, fathering and mothering is important. It takes, and particularly with boys, it does take a mother to raise a boy. It takes a father to raise a man. We need to start instilling and having father warriors and mentors, rites of passage, all of that comes between the father-son bond, which is so important to bring this sense of value and worth and esteem back to masculinity, back to males, back to fathers, and back to boys in particular.
Yeah, I mean, so much to touch on what you was just saying, but talking about Brad Pitt, you're right. When it was looking like he was going to get 50-50, they put it in there as a victory for him and a loss for Angelina. Why? There was equality there. But that's how strong that narrative's gotten. Talking about the gender equality right now, for anybody that's not familiar, Biden is making a gender council, and it includes females and trans and gay, but not men. It's the one thing that's excluded. I know the White House Council, the coalition, has been trying to raise awareness as to what's going on. They're actually trying to make additions to VAWA right now, and we know the trouble that's came with that. I just got to level with you, though, Greg. We've been all across the states talking to these legislators, trying to get things going. We did get a few victories there in Arizona and Kentucky, but it seems like we keep hitting that roadblock. And that's why I say what you're doing, what we've been doing over here, awareness is so critical. When over half of your politicians are attorneys, and you got to have that majority to get these bills through, we're going to have to get that awareness to the next level so that we can put a spotlight, like, look at what they're doing right now. They can do this, and it's kind of behind the scenes without anybody knowing about it. But if we can get that awareness and get people looking at this, that's when I think we're going to hit some change. I'm curious, what are some solutions and ideas that you think, it's just me and you talking. We did it in a conversation not long ago, but let's talk to the movement tonight, because we need our people to stand up, start speaking up. Guys, you can't be silent. If you're going through these false allegations, if you've been through domestic violence, we've seen right now domestic violence to men is happening more than women, but you never hear guys talking about it. We've got to get our people speaking up. And I'm curious your thoughts on how we can get that going, Greg.
Yeah, it's particularly difficult when you're at a low ebb and you feel that like the legal system is treating you unjustly. How do you, I mean, not dwelling on the legal system for too long, but when you have the reason why jurisprudence was introduced into Western civilization legal system was so the burden of proof wasn't on the accused. We do away with the Spanish Inquisition. We do away with the Salem witch trials. We do away with that by putting the burden of proof on the accuser and the state proving beyond the burden of proof beyond a reasonable doubt before a judge or a jury of peers. So until and unless we get that, and we're not going to get too much movement. But you mentioned the VAWA, the Violence Against Women Act, which President Biden is looking at adding even more words to. And I can't imagine it's going to be a positive thing for fathers and families and mothers and children. The silver bullet of the false accusation of domestic violence is a technique and tool being weaponized for financial gain, created by, I firmly believe it was created by, not necessarily on purpose. I don't think and it was President Biden's act as well. He pushed this through. It was his ideation that got this started. But I do think this financial gain was created by VAWA. And that series of law enforcement grants that shifted the focus away from the problems of the relationship to a malleable problems of the relationship, to a more stringent and strict shift to law enforcement approach to domestic violence, resulting in a shift from the prior discretionary approach to mandatory detain and arrest policies. And this was created VAWA created all this money for stop grants. To qualify for stop grants, law enforcement agencies had to adopt policies of mandatory arrests. So law enforcement, when called to a domestic violence disturbance or dispute, are forced to prosecute domestic violence to keep the coffers full. And this funnels the people, predominantly men and fathers, into a system that almost ensures the destruction of the relationship, the undoing of a family, and the devastation of a child's psychology. They get split psyches between mom and dad when family splits and broken homes. And I don't need to go into the statistics of, children who grow up in a home with their biological mother and father, and how better off they are in every conceivable metric, as opposed to children growing up in single parent households. I was stunned when I found out, Eric, that the world leader is in single parent household, children growing up in single parent households.
Who's
America. At 43% of American children live without their father. 63% of youth suicides are from dad-deprived homes. 71% of high school dropouts come from fatherless and dad-deprived homes. So, you ask what's to be done. Well, what I'm trying to do is kind of a multi-phase approach. First and foremost, to get the book out and keep talking about the book, and hopefully that will become a bit more evergreen and stick around, and people will read it. The Respondent, exposing the cartel of family law, getting more celebrities involved, not because this is, it's not about hanging out with celebrities. No, isn't this great? But it does raise the bar in terms of media, the narrative, and the stories. Let me tell you, there are celebrities who haven't been out there yet, who no one knows about, who are going through this right now, that I'm talking with, and eventually they will speak up. It takes a tremendous amount of courage to speak up, whether you're a celebrity or not. So everyone does it in their own time, but I think we do have to come together under one banner. I've talked with so many groups and organizations and people who've been at this for decades, really working tirelessly to bring about some change. And I think one of the issues is there are so many groups, and a lot, sometimes egos get in the way, and sometimes people are very dogmatic. And I understand if you've started a movement or an organization or a charity, you want to see it through to the end. But I'm more like, I just want to do what needs to be done to get this message out there. But with my experience in the media and in the entertainment business, I think I have a good notion of what might be done to kind of put this more on the map and get it more front and center, not just on news shows and in the media, but in terms of policies and social policy and politics. So I think it's really about encouraging people to come together, volunteer. I have a small group of volunteers that work for me on the Respondent, and they're wonderful. I started a charitable extension to the Respondent. It's called CPU, which stands for Children and Parents United. And CPU is really, our mission is to promote and improve child well-being by providing information and resources to policymakers, legislatures, practitioners, and the public, resulting in enhanced relationships and reduced conflict for those children and parents navigating our current family law systems. And we're developing three programs, three cost-effective, practical, solution-based programs: CPU communication, CPU mediation, and CPU law. And really that is to work alongside but outside family law. We're creating some really cutting edge programs, developing them, and moving forward. We've just had our first couple of mediation cases, and it's been wonderful to be in this not for profit. I mean, there is an element of for profit, not for profit, because you need to make money to keep the charity going. But at the same time, if you can put that money back into the charity, and you can bring together, Dr. Warren Farrell's someone we've been talking about his couples communication course, about maybe bringing that on with CPU and helping people in that way, interpersonal relating, because it starts and ends with trust breaking down. So there's so much can be done. I'm not going to say the usual pithy responses that people say, get involved with your local politicians. And, one of the things I should say that I'm working on, I probably shouldn't say this, but I talked with my board of the charity the other day, is billboards. Great artist who's created some billboards. And someone out of the blue, an anonymous donor out of the blue, bless this amazing woman, wants to put billboards up. So what I suggested, she actually said, does your ex-wife have a billboard near the house, near where she lives? I'm like, no, we're not going there. We're not going there. We can actually be more strategic, I think. So what I'd like to do is get the first billboard outside the Stanley Moss Courthouse in LA, and really, really hit home and really hit home what is going on, and get it in the faces of these judges and these attorneys, petitioners and respondents attorneys, clerks of the court, bailiffs, everyone who profits from this industry, from us parents, from us families, our children's inheritances, and say enough. I think it's a two-pronged attack. One is empathy. How can we support people who are going through this, learn more, get educated, information, fight on many fronts to just kind of make through it, and then and be a family champion, as I call it. And the other is to call out people that are really damaging families and parents and children, and really do it in a loud, provocative way sometimes. And I'm more than happy to do that, because, like I said to you before we came on air, there are people dying. Suicide rates are higher than ever because of this pandemic. Social isolation. We're told physical, social distancing. What a nonsense message to be telling people. They can't even get that two-word message right. It should be physical distancing and social connectedness. This is how many nincompoops we have running our government and our state legislatures. And no one has the gumption or the nous to correct it. We are human beings. We are social creatures. We need to be socially connected. And how damaging is it when suddenly something happens and a silver bullet is shot off in family law, and then boom, separated families, children don't see dad, don't see mom, or don't see the party for that long, or it's horrific for the psychology and the well-being of our children and parents, and ultimately our families and grandparents and extended families. I mean, lest we forget about them.
Yeah, three of the most requested people that people would reach out about: Johnny Depp, Brad Pitt, and Alec Baldwin. These are all people that you've got speaking up about that. We get flack for talking to celebrities sometimes, which I've never understood.
Why?
I think it goes back to the organizations and the egos that you talk about. And
Check
so
your ego. There are people dying. There are people
that's it.
losing their livelihoods. There are families getting destroyed. If anyone has an issue with you, Eric, just tell them to give me a call, all right?
Well, definitely will
You're
do.
working tirelessly. I mean, there are so many people, so many local heroes. I cut you off again. I know I'm waffling.
No, you're fine.
But that's just so frustrating and irritating that people have the audacity to make it about them. You know, oh, don't speak to a celebrity. Do people not understand PR and marketing and how it works? And how I don't care. I'll speak to anyone. You know, I will. I've had people say to me, oh, why are you on that show? Or why have you been on Fox? Or why have you been on OAN? Or why have you, like, because I'm talking about family law. I'm talking about devastated families and children and doing some good and being of service. So off.
I mean, you can't be choosy. You want to get awareness out there. People say, oh, you're just trying to get attention. Yeah, every single place that we can possibly get it, because we need attention on the issue. But, you know, speaking about fostering that community, it is very scary for them to come out and speak about what they are going through because of the tabloids and everything else. I mean, what was that like with, you know, Johnny and Brad, getting them to speak out about these issues?
Well, you know, I think all of Johnny's major issues started in 2016 in May with the firing of the silver bullet by Amber Heard and the Heard-say evidence, as I call it, and her sheeple gathering in a herd behind that Heard-say evidence. And I do, you know, I've caught a bit of flack from some of Johnny's supporters when I've said that, you know, I have a little bit of empathy for her because I don't think she realized even just how despicable the behavior is within family law, perhaps. But I think his trouble started in 2016. He wrote the introduction to my book, The Respondent, which was very kind of him. And Alex, 2015, what happened to me, there was nothing out there to help. I couldn't find organizations. I did Google searches, and all I came across was law firms wanting to take my money, and books on how to ruin your husband and how to get rid of your husband and how to win the kids and win the house and get the cash. And it was all just so horrible, dirty and turgid. It was ugh. But I needed relief. I at least needed hope, even though I didn't get relief. And I reached out to Alec because coincidentally, my ex-wife's attorney was the same attorney that represented Kim Basinger. And the same attorney, by the way, who made 1.8 million, I think it was about 1.8 million from my ex-wife, and then proceeded to file to leave the case and is now suing her, I think, for nearly $500,000. But that's a whole other story. What an absolute waste. Go
figure.
Yeah. And what, you know, people like that, you know, I try not to think ill of people, but that human being, that attorney is pure, unadulterated evil, breaking up families, lying in court, the stories I could tell you. And it's okay because it's the Wild West of family law. But Alec I reached out to, and he was very generous enough to email me back. And he said, for right now, just read my book. And his book that he'd written was called A Promise to Ourselves. And I never told him, but I only got about 20 pages in because I hadn't actually gone into court at that point. And his book is all really about, it takes place mainly in the courtroom setting. And so it was kind of a precursor. It was a daunting, harrowing, like, this is what's going to happen to me. So I kind of could see what was going to happen. I was like, I'm going to live it. I don't want to read it as well as living it. And so I made a promise to myself through his book that I would pass it along. I would pay it forward, what he'd done. And he emailed me back when I said I was going to write a book. He said, if you get a publishing deal and you get it published, I'd love to write the forward if you like, and I'd love to help publicize it. So I'm going to be chatting with him on his show soon, and you know, I'm going to be rallying more and more people as the months go forward to talk about this and get my mini movement more motivated to have more impact. I have some great people. I have Molly Olson, who's the secretary and kind of driving force behind CPU. She started Center for Parental Responsibility, I think it was 21 years ago. She's just an incredible woman. And Mike McCormick, who's been in various different movements and organizations for many years. He's our executive director and treasurer. And then we have as chairman, we have Andrew Bishop, who's a producer friend of mine for many years. He's his company, The Brave Road PBC, is a wonderful company here in Hollywood. So we're going to be creating more media. We have some projects that are in development. We are just about, I believe, I can't really say officially, but we're about to receive funding for a feature film documentary, feature length documentary, based on the cartel of family law, to expose them, to educate, but also expose. So yeah, there's many different ideas that we have going on.
I mean, this is an exciting time. We've got more voices that are speaking out on these issues than ever before. And I think, again, like I said, once we get that awareness, I hate that we see what happens with the legislature, Greg. I mean, going and talking to these people, I mean, they don't care. They don't care. You talk about that attorney and how much money they made and then dropped off the case. They don't care. As long as they're putting money in their back pockets, that's all that matters.
That's what they care about. They do care, but they care about the money. They put cash over kids and these campaigns that they run. I mean, there's two main groups that we're up against here. One group is, and I use the proverbial we, one group is the American divorce machine, the nearly $60 billion a year divorce industry. And the second group is again, not the empowerment, equality, factual feminists, the radical brand of feminism, the postmodern, progressive, intersectional feminists that want to do away with the families, and them and the domestic, strangely, many of the domestic violence support groups and organizations. They are very strong in terms of lobbying, in terms of getting grants and money, and they push an agenda. There are a couple that don't. I want to be clear. There are a couple that don't, but there are some.
Very few.
Wow, there are very few. I mean, if you think about, I had Erin Pizzi on my show, The Respondent. Erin's a wonderful woman. I think she's 82 now. 51 years ago, she started the first domestic abuse shelter. And what she saw, I mean, she was a trailblazer. She was that pioneer for the movement. And what she saw after a while was many of the women coming into her shelter were actually perpetrators of violence as well. Now, this isn't saying, women are violent, men are not, and men are violent, women are not. It's like, look, we all have the propensity for good and evil.
Right.
So she saw that, she called it out, and she got, her cat was poisoned and killed. The bomb squad was sent to her home. She got hounded out of England. So this just goes to show, and now here she is 51 years later. She can't even go into the shelter that she started. She's persona non grata. She's seen as the enemy. So what does that tell you? It tells you that there is a driving force, as Erin would say, of these radical feminists who back in 1969, when they met, there was a split in the movement, and they pivoted their messaging, and they had this meeting in New York, and they decided they were going to stick on two words: toxic masculinity. And it took decades and decades, and here we are. And for the last 5-6 years, that's been the drumbeat of the radical feminists. And we need a Me Too dialogue, not a Me Too monologue. And we men need to step up, and we need to be more involved and speak out. And if we're not allowed to be in our children's lives, like I'm not, then I'm gonna scream from the hilltops when I need to.
I'm there with you. You mentioned this in England. I don't think a lot of the American audience knows just how much this is going on in other countries. I mean, we hear from Canada, England, Australia seems to be having a very big problem with parental alienation. We'll actually have one of the senators on later on this week. Great. That is campaigning straight on parental alienation. Now, that's amazing, but wow. This is a worldwide issue that we are facing right now, and it's time to unite that message. I think, a lot of them have told me that they're waiting on America to do something because America's laws influence their country.
Well, we're up against very dark forces, okay? And, when you mentioned the UK, it was late last year. I was doing some work. There was a domestic abuse bill going through the House of Commons and the House of Lords, and I was speaking to a couple of members of the House of Lords. And when I found out that it was a domestic abuse bill for women and girls, domestic violence abuse bill for women and girls, I nearly went apoplectic. I'm like, so basically, we're not protecting baby boys. We're not protecting young children, young boys. We're not protecting teenage boys, gay boys. First of all, this is not equality. And second of all, it's so glaringly obvious that there is an agenda, which is, much of it is victimhood. And this victimhood, the new social currency, and its economy is booming, which pays huge dividends. And the inflation has gone through the roof. And when victimhood is rewarded, responsibility never follows. And particularly with the false allegations of DV, which is the go-to playbook, the silver bullet paradigm that I speak about, it's become, what it is, it's an affront to the real victims of domestic violence. Shame on these women. I mean, I'm going to say it right now. Shame on these women who call it out, who make false allegations in a moment and ruin the reputation of a father. And sometimes it's mothers who get it too. I interviewed a mother from Pennsylvania, a nurse, 2 kids falsely accused of child abuse, lost her kids, lost her job, thrown in prison, had a heart attack. I mean, these stories are abhorrent. And then when we find out months down the line that they were false, the allegation, we've proved their falsehood. Well, this is another reason why we need to put domestic violence tried in criminal court, because parents would get their rights. The accused would have rights, Miranda rights, and the right to speak to an attorney and a defense, et cetera, et cetera. But there would also be perjury charges rather than these slapdash, nonsensical, quasi-kangaroo court contempt charges. There was 187 against my ex-wife. I mean, you talk about Alec Baldwin, I think there were nearly 200 in his case. What's the point?
Oh, my God. Did you have I told you about the story of John Mass, Greg?
You may have. Remind me again.
So he was a father that had faced false allegations, proved his innocence in every way he could, was exonerated on every charge. He was on our show last Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
And then 2 months later, he was finally awarded unsupervised visitation with his kids. And when he got to the parking lot, he was met by the ex-father-in-law that shot him 3 times and killed him. Right after that, Mom pulls up in the car and both of the kids see their dad dead there on the ground. But this, just hearing his story, we released a documentary about a week ago, but hearing his story and what he went through, having to, prove his innocence to these people. And every time that he proved his innocence and was exonerated, something else happens. And Mom just completely moved to the other side of the country after he was awarded custody. She took the kids and took off. She should have been arrested right then. But we see how often this goes. You was talking about the mandatory arrest with not to make this a gender thing, but guys, there is very big gender problems that's going on. I've seen it where guys will call the cops and say, "Hey, she was beating me." They show up and they arrest him.
Oh yeah, I've seen multiple stories of that. Well, first of all, John, that's a horrific story. I did watch that documentary, and that's why it flagged it up for me, that story. I think about the children, I think about just the loss of life and how unnecessary it is when you have a combative system that pits people against each other. We have to improve this system. We really do. Like, I can't say who, because I created through CPU, when I do the mediation, a confidentiality pledge. But a couple that have been nearly 6 years in family law spent nearly $2 million and finding solutions for them in a day that the family law system and $5-6 million couldn't find in 6 years. It's not rocket surgery. I mean, a little bit of nonviolent communication, a little bit of empathy, a lot of experience, and sometimes some tough love, and a clever tactical approach to how to navigate 2 people and their differences, time, and not incentivized to, let's keep this going because I can get more money per hour. How do these people rest their heads on their pillows at night and their conscience? What does their conscience whisper to them?
I don't know that they have one.
Well, everyone does, God may forgive you sins, but your nervous system won't. We know internally when we're not living a righteous or a good or honest, humble life. And you're right. You're so right. This system is it's a snake pit. It's a gladiatorial arena. It's It's a quagmire. It's a mess. And it's become so big, so full of so many cottage industries that you almost have to blow it up and start again. But I don't think that's going to happen. So you kind of have to see where you can kind of affect it in some small way, in some big way, and helping individuals, which I try and do when I have the time, one-on-one, but also, trying to be mindful of the bigger picture, because the more I can affect the bigger picture out there, the more people it will affect, across the board. I've been humbled by the amount of people that email me on a daily basis, having read the book or being connected to the project. So, shout out to everyone.
That's the hardest part of it. You can never get to all of them. The amount of parents that this is happening to, for every case that we try to offer some help, there's hundreds that are going by because of this, and the lack of resources that these guys got to turn over to. The only thing they have, that they can reach out to is an attorney, and we know what that causes. So, it's really, it's no wonder why we're seeing the suicide rate the way it is. These guys feel like they just have no hope.
Well, we have generations of children growing up in single parent households or in foster care. Look at foster. I've only just started to look into this, Eric, which is, it staggered me when I started to find this out. So 4,000 children a day lose a parent in family law. 4,000 children. 85% of the time, the child loses the father. 250,000 children are placed into foster care every year.
Yeah.
Do you know the states get reimbursed $6,000 by the federal government for every child they place in foster care?
I did not.
So you have the CPS. When I looked into this, the CPS, wow, the Child Protection Services, it couldn't be a more inept name for them. For decades now, children have been removed intentionally from their homes, seized from their families for profit, snatched. This isn't bombastic hyperbole. I'm not saying this is fact. Snatched, kidnapped, legally trafficked. That's what it is. All due to legislation introduced in 1974, the Adoption and Safe Families Act, which offers financial incentives to the states that increase adoption numbers. So to receive the adoption incentives and bonuses, local CPS, DCFS, whatever the acronym is, must have more children. They must have more, they view it as merchandise to sell. Get that? Our children are merchandise to sell. So funding's available when a child is placed in a foster home with strangers or placed in a mental health facility and medicated, as it's called, usually against the parents' wishes. And parents are being victimized by this system that makes a profit for holding children longer. Bonuses, bonuses are paid for not returning the children to their parents. Get that?
That is nuts.
It's a growing criminal, I believe it's a growing global criminal and political scandal, and the judiciary are involved, and I don't say this lightly, with child trafficking. And who gets targeted the worst? Poor parents, people from disadvantaged neighborhoods and backgrounds. They're targeted to lose their children by CPS and DCFS because they don't have the wherewithal or the resources to hire an attorney to fight the system. Being poor and lacking proper housing doesn't mean your children should be removed, and then the CPS and the state and the federal government incentivizes it with money and reimburses it to child traffic your children into foster homes and adoption. CPS has redefined poor to mean psychologically inferior. I get up in arms about this because I only recently started looking into this, and it's despicable. It's absolutely, utterly despicable that this kind of child protection service Gestapo has carte blanche to walk into people's homes, trample the Constitution, trample their civil rights. It's one thing to come at me as a man, but to go after my children, it's unconscionable. And we need to start talking more about it.
We do. And I'm glad you brought that up because you just taught me something I didn't know about. When it comes to the child support, the alimony, shared parenting, there's all these little different facets out there, and they all stem from the same thing, money. There seems to be some incentive. The incentive that you was talking about with the adoption, it reminds me of the Title 4D incentive over on the child support side. And the fact that they're getting away with this, we've had more people talking about CPS than ever before. I had a former Sheriff Richard Mack on the show not long ago. They took his grandkids. And you want to talk about a pissed off sheriff. He was pissed off, and he was talking about, how the cure is worse than the disease.
Mm-hmm.
CPS has failed us on many different levels. I've talked to some former CPS workers that just talks about, that they have little to no help. One, there's no training. And there's so many cases, and they have pressure to close them as quick as possible. So the cases that need focus aren't getting any focus. And then the ones that they never should have been out there in the first place are getting their kids taken away.
Yeah, we need some CPS solutions. CPS independent audits of every state, federal, congressional hearings are long overdue. We need to remove and abolish the state financial incentives that have turned CPS into a business that traffics children and separates families for money. We need to open family court and remove the confidentiality laws. We need to give parents their rights, at least verbally and in writing. We need, cases to remove children and terminate the rights of parents should be heard by a jury with evidence, a presumption of innocence for the parents. We need to close CPS and DCFS down and start again from a pro-family position, not from a Gestapo, Stasi, we have carte blanche to come in here. I mean, law enforcement even bends the knee to CPS, these smart teams that get called in. To do quick snapshot evaluations of parents who wouldn't be stressed, who wouldn't present, as they say in the psychological realm, who wouldn't present as anxious and irritated. And what father wouldn't want to stand up and say no and get a bit angry and aggressive and assertive? But no, that's then construed as violence. Words aren't violence. I've heard so much recently about words being violence and people are offended. And I come from a place of, offense is only taken, not given. So if you choose to take offense, take it. I'm talking about the law. I'm talking about children. We need to speak up for the poor and the needy and those who need relief. We need to speak up for the most vulnerable among our society. These tens of thousands of children that are being taken from homes that are safe. That's the key thing here. These are homes that are safe. Nobody's perfect. All of us parents, we might raise our voice occasionally. We might, but ultimately, parents get to decide what happens with their children. When I've seen recently in England with the vaccine, I don't want to talk about the vaccine, but 12 to 15-year-olds, the government in England is now saying that 12 to 15-year-olds have consent over their parents about whether they take the vaccine or not. I'm pro-vaccine, but how dare you step in over parents and tell children that they, at 12 years old, can make that decision? No. We have a devaluation of the family going on here, and it's at a very dangerously high level. And these powers that are being used are, it's fraud perpetrated against children and families, and it's abhorrent, and it cannot and it must not be tolerated in a civilized society.
But letting them decide that does what again? It increases the conflict, and they love that to happen. I mean, what you just said reminded me, there was somebody that wanted to know if you was familiar with the Jeff Younger case that's going on in Texas. This is a case where they've been trying to gender transition the father's son since he was 7 years old. Now, the father's got video of the boy saying, I want to be a boy, but mama wants me to be a girl. She puts him in a dress and a wig. His name is James, but she sends him to school as Luna. He's 9 now. The father has spent $1.1 million fighting against this. Just recently lost custody. They put a gag order on him, told him he was not allowed to speak about it. And here's his father trying to protect against this gender transition. He has no control, no say-so, no nothing over what's going on. This is very scary times that we're living in, because I believe, again, that's going to have so much conflict, because you got the psychologist, you got all these different experts that's got to be on that case, and the family court arena just loves it. The vaccines, that's another thing that they can just add in there. Anytime that we allow the courts to make the decisions for parents, we're treading dangerous waters.
Yeah, where
We
do we
really
get
are.
to a place where our legal system and our judges, so in effect, these family law judges, because ask anyone in law. I mean, I was chatting with Alan Dershowitz a couple of months ago and other attorneys as well. And they're, in real law, as I call it. And they say, those who don't have talent, those who can't put the work in, those who are lazy, those who are not smart, they're practicing family law. Why? Because you can do so little and make so much money.
Yep.
And yes, I do know about that case, and I don't think it's going to end well. I think it's going to get more horrific. There'll be, like many of these cases, small, momentary, maybe victories and parts of relief along the way. But when you mix in family law with intersectionality in the conversation about, transgender and non-binary and all of the Coca-Cola language that people are drinking up these days, and the speech police and the thought police, you're in a domain where it's just gonna, it's toxic beyond. And I have a tremendous amount of compassion and empathy and for that chap who's going through that, because that's the Achilles heel. The Achilles heel when you're in family law is as a father and as a mother too. I speak from a place of father because I am a man and a father. Is when you love your children.
Yeah.
I didn't love my sons. If we men didn't love our children, if we were deadbeat, if we were like, yeah, they're all right, but you go ahead and look at. No, we love our children, engaged with them, present with them.
Yep.
Extracurricular activities, sacrificing for them, earning money, working extra hours, grinding away to buy clothes and food and whatever the situation. But we love them. But because we love them, we're punished, and it's unrelenting, sometimes inescapable, seemingly inescapable trauma that comes with that. And because we're men and we're stoic, we're not supposed to talk about it. We're not supposed to talk about what we go through. We're not supposed to shed tears. I shed tears at the drop of a hat. I mean, listening to the story earlier on about that father who finally won custody and was gunned down. I remember watching that doc that you did, and it breaks me, man. It breaks me because I know I have a real idea of what he went through to get to that point. And that point should have been his starting point, not his end point.
That's it, man. And standing over his casket was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. It shows you just how real that this can get. We've got parents, we've got children that are losing their lives. And you would think it would be a wake-up call for the legislation and the family courts, but it's not. It's not. No, we're just going to have to keep getting a little bit louder. I know we got just a few minutes left, Greg, but we've got some comments in here for you. Sure. Mark Esquivel said, how do you get women to believe 82% of the time they are awarded the custodial parent? Until the U.S. people against them courts come together, it will never get to an equal percentage of parenting time. So how do we do that?
How do we get women to believe 82% of the time that they are awarded the custodial parent? Until the U.S. people against them come together, it will never get an equal parent. I'm trying to understand the question. And hey, Mark, thanks for the question. How do you get women to believe 82% of the time they are? Can you extrapolate that for me, Eric? Because I'm trying to get an answer here. How do we do what? How do we get women to believe?
I think he might be asking, like, how do we get them to understand the situation that men are in? One of the biggest things that we get all the time is the moms too crowd. And we always usually, just about every time in this show and every other show we've done, we recognize that this happens to women too. But some of the challenges that these men are facing for no other reason but because they are male. Yep. And 82.5% of the time, we are on the losing side of this. Okay, so we've got to be able to speak out without being canceled when we speak, to show the importance of what it is we're going through. You have any ideas on how to, I guess, kind of bring them together to say, look, this is what we're going through, and encourage it?
Yeah, it's a really tough. Well, first of all, thanks for the question, Mark, and thanks, Eric, for kind of, I'm English, so sometimes I get a bit befuddled reading. And if Mark, that's a picture of your kids there, your beautiful girls, just big shout out to you. And how do we do that? It's tough, because cancel culture, and this Me Too monologue I talk about, we need a Me Too dialogue. I think we have to in some ways be chameleons at times. When I can sniff out when I'm up against a radical postmodern progressive third or fourth wave feminist who wants to do away with men, who's a misandrist, and they're calling out misogyny, then I'm going to call out misandry. And it's like point counterpoint. But I think for the most part, we have to try and be smart. We have to try and be empathic. We try and have to see the other side, the other point of view, not get stuck in the mud of perpetually having to say, fathers, percentage. But it happens to mothers too. I mean, I know I do it, but it does. But the stats are borne out. When I look at the petitioner and the respondent, I think something like 82% of divorces are filed by petitioners are women. Yep. And the number goes up for educated women. I think it's over 90%. So it's no wonder when you have a flawed system and a biased system that rewards the petitioner. Okay, it's very clear that I could list the rewards that the petitioner gets from being the petitioner, from filing first. So if you correlate that 80 and 90% for educated women as the petitioner, then they are going to have a supreme advantage. And as well, if you look at as well the advent of gender roles and women in the workplace and the suffragette movement and equal rights and feminism, and how women have really pushed and men have helped push as well, because the definition of feminism isn't just woman, it's human being who supports women's rights. Is that's really greatly improved recently through our modern civilization. But I think in many regards in family law and divorce court, we're still stuck in that outdated idea of the 60s that women are the major caregiver and mothers are the major caregivers and dads are out just doing the work and grinding and earning the money and bringing the money home. Well, you can't have it both ways. So how do we improve that conversation? Sometimes you can't. Sometimes you just have to, push back and state a fact and do your research and your homework. And, it's tough. It's a really difficult conversation to have, particularly in mainstream media, on some of the more progressive left-wing media outlets, shall we say.
We're talking about equality here. And if there's a mother that's facing this and they want to see that equality as well, 82% of the time, guys, this is what's happening to men. So making sure that they get out there and speak about this, it's necessary. We're fighting for equality here. Equality for fathers means equality for mothers, and equality for parents means equality for children. We
want a system that's fair. We want a system that is fair. And we want a system that doesn't pit people into the 12 rounds in a 3-ring circus of nonsense, of just paying money and people getting blackmailed and everyone, it's a zero-sum game. These divorce laws are zero-sum. And we have to start thinking in terms of keeping people out of court. That's the number one. How can we keep people out of court? How can we build systems outside of court, or at least work alongside court, that aren't corrupted, that aren't part of the cartel that make these billions of dollars, to provide people with real immediate interventions into well-being and lasting relief for the entire family, that values the entire family, even if it happens to be a situation where mother has behaved abhorrently or father has committed a crime or whatever else. They are still the biological parent to that child, and we need to keep connected.
Love it. Couldn't have said it better myself, man. Ann McKinnon Davison, and this is sad because I think a lot of times grandparents get left out of the conversation. There's a whole other side of the family that gets alienated. She said, I'm an alienated grandmother, and I ordered and read the Respondent. I was shocked at how quickly your life was destroyed by screwed up wife, her family, and screwed up system. I hope I'm wrong, but I foresee my son going through this sometime in the future. The cruelty of his in-law family is obvious to me. I've been under an active harassment protection order in my state since 2019 after I tried to bring gifts to my 1-year-old grandson. How many grandparents have you heard since you wrote this book, Greg?
Way too many. And it's almost, I talk about living grief and hey, Ann, thank you for the question. And, my heart goes out to you and your family and everyone involved, even the victim perpetrators, as I call them, who should know better, who should put the children first. Way too many, Eric. The real tragedy here is when a divorce happens, there are two extended families. So with parental alienation, it's not just a parent. We should call it family alienation, because that's really what happens here with parental alienation. An entire family gets distanced from their child, from their grandson, from their niece, their nephew. And so, Anne's story is sadly all too common. There are so many support groups. I've seen them in the UK, in America, in Australia, and other places in Europe, for the forgotten grandparents. And good grief, the bond between grandparents and grandchildren is so special.
Yes.
It's so, and we forget how necessary that is. I think if we think back to when we were kids, and that's the common denominator here, everyone in this system, everyone having a conversation about this was a child once. We were all innocent and young and vulnerable. And that bond between a grandparent and their child, and a child and a grandparent, is lasting memories for life. It is part of the safe space of healthy boundaries in the imagination that a child has outside of their immediate family. It is a trust network of grand patriarch and grand matriarch that is so necessary. So, Anne, wherever you are in America, I'm sending you love. I'm sending you support. God bless you. Just hang in there, that's what's so difficult, Eric. I was doing a talk once, and there was a young fellow who just lost his child, his 2-year-old baby, and he was in Europe, and he's, we need Greg Ellis here in Sweden. And I just stopped everything, and I started tearing up, and I just looked into the camera, and I talked directly to him, and I said, I am in Sweden right now. I'm here, right there on your screen. And people need hope, and they need relief. But what I can't do is, I will never say to people, it's going to be okay. When people say to me, oh, well, eventually your kids, your sons will come. You don't know that. So I won't offer false hope. That's not to say that I'm not hopeful. It's not to say that my arms are outstretched and my door will always be open, and hopefully I'll be reunited, and there'll be, we'll move forward in some regards. But I think it's really unfair to people to just, oh, it's going to be okay. And I understand why people do it, but no, I don't know, but I can hope. And that's why I'm really pushing particularly with the charity to get these programs developed so they can be accessible to people. And we can get some immediate relief and help out there for people, because that's what they need.
I mean, and I have to, you're saying a lot of honesty right now, and that's the truth about it. It seems like the longer the alienation goes on and the kids grow up, if they've been told this for so long, sometimes they just don't come out of it. And the older they get, the harder it is.
It's brainwashing. I mean, it's very difficult to talk about, parental alienation, but it's turning a child. It's really child abuse. That's what it is. It's also known as turning the children. It's an umbrella term, parental alienation, detailing a series of actions or behaviors with the malicious intent to have the children hate a once beloved parent, or in Anne's particular instance, grandparent. I'm not sure if alienation to that degree is going on there, but the general signs of parental alienation, or PA, are presence of a prior positive relationship between the child and now rejected parent. And that's not that difficult to spot for these judges and quote unquote experts who are getting paid lots of money. Absence of maltreatment or seriously deficient parenting on the part of the now rejected parent, that lack of ambivalence in the child's view, seeing one parent as all good and the other as all bad, criticizing the other parent in front of the other, limiting contact by interfering with the other parent's visitation, all of that, which I mentioned the House of Commons and the House of Lords, that I had no idea in the UK. There's a whole strain of radical feminists who are like, there's no such thing as parental alienation.
Yep.
I was like, what? Excuse me? I was on a call and people were talking about, these learned scholars and doctors and what they do. Well, we should call it this and we should call it that. And what are we calling it now? I'm like, stop the nonsense. What are we calling it now?
Child abuse is what it is.
Bingo. I don't need to be like stuck in the vocabulary of, oh, this is coercive control and this is that. And I get it. I understand. I'm not stupid, but but that's part of the tactic is if we say it doesn't exist, then why would we put something into a bill or a law or an act if it doesn't exist? So the words, it's brilliant strategy, but it needs to be called out.
I couldn't agree with you more. Nothing's more comical than when people reach out to us saying we need to go educate the attorneys and judges. If you're a judge, you should know what's going on. And if you know what's going on, these are the same tricks. The names are the only things that change, but it seems like the alienator, they do the same things over and over. It's not hard. It's not rocket science.
Yeah, they do, and it's working out what those tricks are and calling out the ones that then training, education. There's so much we can do. And by the way, John C. Nichols, I hate the word visitation too. That's in the comment section.
Yeah,
visiting with you. I said this on a show once. When two parents enter a divorce court, one leaves a parent, the other leaves a visitor. So you just go from being a father or a mother, in my case, a father, to a visitor. Ugh. I'm a parent. I'm a dad. I'm a loving father. And, I think we need more. I think we have to unblock the apology pathway for people who do wrong and want to make amends and put it right. I think we have to help people who don't quite know how to, when they've made mistakes and erred and want to put it right. I think there's so much more proactively we can be doing and positively we can be doing to help people in this particular area, and not just rage against the machine, because we need to spirit level the sexes or the X's and find a way to particularly in Texas, from what I've seen, that rhyme with sexes and X's, I couldn't help myself. From what I've seen, like the every other weekend dad, it's like these judges don't know what they're like, because they are older and they come from this antiquated, non-present. No, stop. 50-50. We want equality, 50-50. And then if you want to fight for more time, then the burden of proof is on you, right?
That's it. I mean, there was a bill that they're trying to get through in Iowa that changes the word visitation time to parenting time. And it might not seem like that big of a deal, but the verbiage and just the way that it's looked at, I'm proud for the guys. I hope they can get that through.
Yeah, and hopefully eventually we'll move to mothering and fathering too, not just parenting, because then we can actually talk about how important fathering is, particularly for our younger generations of boys and young men, and why they're suffering and struggling at school, why they're unmotivated, why they have a sense of low esteem, why they are incarcerated at higher rates, why they're dropping out of education, why they're not scoring marks in their grades as high as girls, why they're not moving to higher education, why they're addicted to online porn, video games. I mean, the list is endless, Eric, of the causal. And this isn't about, I've said this before, demonizing, when I hear the demonizing fatherhood's not the solution, it's the problem. And we need to start championing the family more, right? We need to start championing, we have family champions. We need more mentors. We need more allies. We need more laws that aren't zero sum. That afford a little nuance, a little doubt, whether it be, collaborative divorces or mediations or communication courses where people can actually talk through their differences without necessarily having an end goal. Dr. Warren Farrell, who we both know, he saw what was happening with his couples communication course, and he's actually modified it to take it to Europe. I think he went to a school in Europe. And after the recess time, by the way, unstructured playtime has been reduced in America drastically over the last however many years, which is bad for boys with kinetic energy, because boys need to run that off. And so what's going to happen is we're going to see more violent behavior, as this energy needs to have some outlet. And I'm not saying that, boys shouldn't learn to behave, but just telling a boy at 6, 7, 8, 9 years old, sit still, behave, grow up, man up, don't move. Boys play, they roughhouse, it's who they are. But Warren, after recess, he's been doing this experimental course of 15 minutes where before they go back into class, they have conversations. So if the girls have been petty and gossipy about each other and got into squabbles and reputation savage fights, then they'll talk it through. And if the boys have had fights and physical altercations, they'll talk it through. So it's almost that intermediate bridge away, and it doesn't back up that pent up emotion and anger and resentment and sense of, particularly for those kids that come from challenging homes and who are picked on, sense of aloneness and desperation. You know, we want to all feel included and all feel part of our collective community. And I just want a more humane race, really.
I'm right there with you. I know you kind of touched on this a little bit, but Ajit Nanan said, Greg, what about pitching a fiction story that just exposes the system in a fiction way that Hollywood would buy into? I work with some of these executive producers in my role at my job, but I am the tech guy, so it would be weird for me to pitch something like this to Chris DeFaria, type executive producer, but you are in this space as a storyteller. Would you do that? Would love to help in any way.
Well, great, Ajit. Yeah, we'll connect through the respondent.com. Yeah, we have. I spoke to a studio here in Hollywood, a studio head, and I mean, we're in talks to develop. They wanted to do a movie, but I'm pushing for a limited 8 part, probably a 6-part limited drama series, scripted. Based off and inspired by the Respondent, because there are so many parts of the story that are so you wouldn't believe them if they weren't true. I mean, I sat with him and he said, this is like Gone Girl meets The Fugitive meets The Game with The Firm. And there are so many elements and so many people's stories that are cautionary tales, that are larger than life, that sound like Hollywood movies and fiction, but aren't fiction, they are fact. And so, yeah, we're pushing forward, developing more. But anyone, you know, like Ajit, who wants to get involved and help out, they can reach out through the respondent.com. Any information people want to find out about CPU, the charity, right now it resides on the respondent.com, the nonprofit page. So, yeah, I mean, that was part of my strategy, was to get the book written and then sell the movie rights. The audiobook's going to be out soon. I just completed the audiobook, which that should be, I'm really excited about that. I got a couple of great, Kevin Michael Richardson reads the role of the second side. I actually included my medical reports in the book. And so he's on The Simpsons now, actually. He's an American Dad, great voiceover guy, wonderful fellow. He reads the role of Dr. Carl Hoppe, the first psychiatrist, and Andrea Romano, who's a 9-time Emmy Award winner for voice directing. She's kind of the legend of animation and cartoon. She's directed every cartoon and animation show you've ever seen. She was kind enough to direct it and plays the second, actually, she is the second psychiatrist from 2019, Dr. Susan Dupee, and she voices that. So, yeah, my book's really just a legacy, hopefully, my legacy petition to ring the alarm bell about this broken system and to let my boys know that I never walked away.
That's awesome, brother. You know, I've always said, I think, if we had a movie that kind of shows what it's like through the eyes of a child that's going through this, kind of in the style of The Misery, just how dark this can get. I mean, we had the father on last month who's the mom stabbed his 9-year-old to death, 9-year-old and 4-year-old daughter to death. And
yeah, there's a lot of horrific stories out there. And I just want to say, I just saw one of the comments from Daniel saying, it'd be very blunt, Hollywood will quickly shut this down. It won't shut me down, Daniel. You don't know me. You don't know who I'm dealing with. You don't know my tenacity and how far I've already got this. So I do hear what you're saying about the third and fourth wave feminists not tolerating a movie like this. Well, ultimately, that's one of the challenges, but that's also one of the pieces of secret sauce of a project like this and projects like this, The Respondent, is that you're in a space in an area where few fear to tread, many fear to tread, I should say. So there is no end to stories. That's why, Eric, I wanted to rather than the movie, I want to do more a limited series, more because there are more stories and more story elements that can be told. The children's POV, the attorneys, the judges, the legal system, child psychologists, the respondents, the petitioners, all of those characters, because we don't we don't really hear too much about when we're in family law, in divorce court. It's all very arguments and very procedural. So what goes on outside, what goes on behind the scenes, what deals are done, and with, well, like I mentioned, CPS and child trafficking, we can certainly ruffle a few feathers.
Greg, man, I'm so glad we finally got to connect and come on the show for everybody. I know you've mentioned the links a couple of times, but one more time, CPU, the Respondent, tell everybody where they can get a copy of the book and how they can come in there, connect with you in ways they can help.
Yeah, CPU is Children and Parents United, and that right now lives on the official home of the Respondent, which is therespondent.com. People can watch episodes of my show there, video and audio podcast available there, and information about the book and me, realgregellis.com. If anyone's interested in finding more out about me personally, that's probably the place to go, realgregellis.com. And for people who want to buy the book, you can do it through therespondent.com, or you can do it at Amazon. Please share the word about it, because I'm not trying to plug the book or push the book. It's really bigger than me. These words, the Respondent, are way more bigger than I share my story as a vessel, really, to open it up to the tens of thousands of other stories that have been. People have lived them, are living them, and will continue to live them in the future unless we do something drastically to change this just abhorrently broken system and provide people with some relief. So I really appreciate your time, Eric, and I just want to say thank you for everything you're doing with Dad Talk Today, and the great things I'm hearing about you. So let me know how I can support you more, and maybe we'll do this again. I'd love to have you on my show as well.
Man, anytime. The platform's open, and I see the book as a catalyst. That's a way to get it in there and get the conversation going. It's hard doing what we're doing sometimes, and kind of letting that wall down and letting people see a little bit of our lives. But I think that is so important, because there's so many of these other guys that's been told to man up, don't talk about it. When they see other people that have been through it, it encourages them to speak. That's the importance of you guys speaking. What I think when Warren Farrell put it best, he was like, women can't hear what men don't say. Yeah,
it's so true. And that was one of the big reasons I wrote this as well, was to say, I remember being on the phone with a publisher early on, and they were like, so who's the target demographic? And I went to kind of go into a typical Hollywood speech about and I just stopped myself and I said, you know what? I think it's something like 8 or 10 divorced men take their own lives every day. I want to reduce that number. It's 2 divorced women take their own lives every day. I want to reduce that number. On any given day, if we can bring that number down from 10 to 9 or 8 to 7 or 2 to 1 or 0, then that's a victory and that's a success. So my book making millions of dollars, I don't care. I do not care. When it got to #1 on Amazon in the categories of, I think it was fatherhood and divorce, it was the 3rd one it got to #1, and the category #1 I was most proud of, and that was suicide. Because when someone takes their life because of this system, and I've read the suicide notes and spoken to people, fathers a few in the process of, it brings it home just how children should not grow up without a father and a parent. And they certainly shouldn't grow up without a father or a parent because of a legal system that puts in places profit and cash over kids.
Let's change it, man. I truly believe it can happen.
I do too.
People call us crazy and say it never happened. I believe if we rally behind it, you got some good players right now, we can end this thing.
Yeah, it's short-term impact, and there's also medium-term and long-term. And I've walked a lot of red carpets, and in the future, I want to be walking up the steps of institutions and buildings and speaking on behalf of and to people that can change laws and really make a difference. And that's what I've dedicated my life to doing. So I know you have too. So thank you.
Man, thank you for your hard work, brother. I'm sure we'll be speaking again sometime soon.
I'm looking forward to it. Thank you very much, Eric.
All right, guys. Thank you for tuning in tonight. Hey, everybody. Eric Carroll here. Thank you for tuning in to another exciting episode of Dad Talk Today. While we fight for you, we would ask for you to please help fight for us. like, subscribe to our channel, and ring that bell so you get notifications every time we go live. There's also Super Chats, patreon.com/DadTalkToday, and other ways you can support our channel. Thank you for being here, and we will see you next time.